I am Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He is the author of the book Uprooted, no other than Mr. Peter J Boni.
Hello, Daniel.
Welcome to Book 101, Mr. Peter, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
Sure. Peter J Boni. I have a website, www.peterjboni.com. My book, Uprooted, is really a combination of a very intimate memoir as well as a tell-all expose about the assisted reproductive technology industry. And I learned about it quite by accident. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I always considered there were three things that made me who I am today. One was somewhat of a disruptive childhood, lots of moving, a sick dad. I created maybe 11 different schools between the first and the eighth grade. I always considered that the source of my adaptability. The second one was service in Vietnam, combat service in Vietnam as a special operations infantry lieutenant. Uh, Traumatic experience, but I always considered that the source of my collaborative leadership style. And thirdly, just the college education opened up doors of opportunity for me that I never really anticipated. Uh, and I always took my DNA for granted, right? So here
Yes.
I am, age 49. My mother, 75 years old at the time, had a post-operative stroke. She had open heart surgery and then a post-operative stroke. And all of the locks that guarded her secret just didn't work anymore. And I learned that my dad, who was passed away for 33 years, was not biologically my father. He was actually sterile, and I was conceived with the help of an anonymous sperm donor in a fertility clinic under Harvard Medical School auspices. Now, this was year 1945, so there were no records kept uh, either. So I went on a hunt, a dramatic hunt for the source of my seed. And I'll tell you, I have had faced individual, what was it called, identity trauma from that whole experience.
So, Mr. Peter J. Boni, thank you so much for sharing your talents to the world. We salute you and thank you for your service. So, how does the revelation of being conceived via anonymous sperm donation impact an individual's sense of identity?
Well, the trauma created a lot of conflicting emotions all at the same time. How can you be sad and happy all at the same time? How can you be angry and uh, relieved all at the same time? In my case, my dad was mentally ill. He had unipolar depression, uh, and he was hospitalized for the last 4 years of his life until he took his own life when I was 16 years old. Uh, Old school Italian family that was hush hush, don't talk about it, don't let anybody know. It might shine over on to us. We don't want them to think anything badly of us. So I kind of bought into that. So it was a secretive uh, happening in my life, and I never grieved properly for my dad with his death either. So the whole experience of learning that he wasn't biological, I was relieved, I was deceived, and I was grieving all at the same time, grieving for him like I never grieved properly to begin with.
So, Mr. Peter, what psychological effects can arise from discovering one's biological origins later in life?
Well, what I learned, I had my family and friendship circle suggested that I go to do some therapy, and I signed up to that old school of therapy. Like if you need therapy, maybe you're weak and you're unfit for command. I was a CEO at the time, and I kept it very quiet. I saw both in the boardroom and in the war room. Uh, Perhaps if you need some help like that, you might be unfit for command. So I was very quiet about it, but I needed some assistance. And I cycled through a couple of therapists before I found the right one for me. And he told me, he said, you hit a trifecta, son. What do you mean, trifecta? He said, well, new trauma rekindles old trauma thought long past. So this new trauma I experienced, my identity trauma, if I wasn't Northern Italian, what was I? What was my health history? Did I have any siblings? What was my genealogy to begin with? Uh, that rekindled the grief that I had with my dad and the disruptive childhood, and it rekindled some old baggage with PTSD from Vietnam that I also camouflaged.
So, how does family secrecy surrounding conception methods contribute to generational trauma?
That's a good question. I was angry for a long time with my PTSD and my old baggage, and I had a veneer about myself where I told myself when I was younger and my dad had taken his own life that I was going to be strong and resourceful and I would never allow my family to feel that I was weak. Well, that had an impact on my intimacy with my wife because I couldn't express my fears, my anxieties. I had to be Mr. Strong. And at the time that I learned this at age 49, I was going through a marital crisis, principally because of that intimacy that I was robbing her of by not expressing my own fears and misgivings and anxieties.
So, Mr. Peter, in what ways can the lack of knowledge about one's genetic heritage affect personal relationships?
Well, I gave everyone has a different scene of things. I gave you mine, and mine was really uh, uh, playing things a little too close to my vest.
Certainly. So, who has the history of artificial insemination evolved, and what ethical considerations have emerged?
Well, from an ethics standpoint, well, let's go back. 1884, would you believe, was the first recorded donor conception? 1884 is a long time ago. It came public in around 1909.
Yes,
Uh, the uh, the industry was never illegal, but it was bound with a good deal of secrecy. Today, now we advanced this 100 plus years. Today, you have a multi-billion-dollar industry, the fertility industry, the assisted reproductive technology industry, that enables the conception of a human being with no law saying that the donor must be tested for
yes.
anything. There's no requirement for a known donor, so the donor could be anonymous. No health history, no sibling registry, no restriction on the number of offspring per donor. Would you believe people could have over 100 siblings, and they do? Uh, there's no mandatory counseling for the donor or the recipient of the donor's seed regarding the needs of the donor conceived. And there's no laws for blatant fertility fraud. For instance, a doctor using his own sperm as opposed to a donor on a countless number of patients, or a sperm donor, for instance, going to a bank and stating that uh, he has a PhD and he speaks 5 languages when really he's a convicted felon and a schizophrenic, real cases, by the way. So all of that wrapped up, I call it the donor conceived Bill of Rights, and I'm an advocate for the industry now and that donor conceived Bill of Rights. And I'm all for science to enable wanting people to have a family. Just do it with some consideration for the people created by the science, people like me.
Certainly. So, Mr. Peter, how does society perception of artificial insemination influence individuals conceive through this method?
Well, the social science research is prolific on this of late, and they all agree that it's in the best interest of the individual, the child, just to know right up front at the very, very beginning of his life that he or she is donor conceived. Let it be part of his emotional woodwork. Then he can gain further knowledge as he goes on and gets older. But that knowledge right up front, as opposed to a surprise like me at age 49, is really key. Now, when I was in psychology class in college, I remember studying genealogical bewilderment, and this was a phrase coined by two psychologists in the 60s, and they were studying adoptees and the adoptees' the inability sometimes to adjust to their environment. Uh, well, in the old days, they called donor conception semi-adoption, right?
Yes.
Closed adoption, not telling people. So I was suffering from that genealogical bewilderment, and it raged within me, and it drove me to research this whole field. And it took me 22 years to find the source of my seed. I discovered this in 1995. Now that was 12 years before 23andMe came out with their first product that was the 2008 Time Magazine Innovation of the Year. And it took me until 2017 using another a vendor, Ancestry.com, actually to find the source of my seed.
So, Mr. Peter, how does the anonymity of sperm donors impact the medical history available to donor conceived individuals?
Well, if health history were not important, why does your doctor ask you? Why when you go to a new doctor they want to know your health history? I had half of a history.
Hmm. Yes. So, what are the potential legal implications for donor conceived individuals seeking information about their biological parents?
I'm not sure I understand your question. There's no law against the finding uh, the information. Uh, Many people signed up to be anonymous, in quotes, anonymous.
Yes.
Well, science, DNA consumer over the internet, has basically obsoleted anonymity.
Okay. Interesting fact, Mr. Peter. So, what would be your advice for those people out there looking for their real parent?
Well, DNA does not lie, and there's a great way to find through for $39 on a Black Friday sale through one of these DNA services like Ancestry or 23andMe or Heritage.com or MyHeritage.com. You can also consolidate. If you do with one, you can take your raw DNA and put it on all of these sources, and find the source of your seed. And by finding that, you find your health history. You find siblings you didn't know you had, relatives you didn't know you had. I mean, my question now is now that I know this, what my genealogy is. Okay, I'm not Northern Italian. I'm English, French, and a sliver of Scandinavian. Well, I can live with that. Uh, I have a good health history. I know what that is. I actually have met a few siblings. The question I have that will never be answered, ever, ever, for the entirety of my life: how many siblings do I have really? Did I ever date a sibling? Did I ever date a sibling? Or worse?
Yes. How would you find out that one, Mr. Peter? How are you going to find out? So, what will be your short term and long term goals in writing?
Well, I gave myself three goals when I published my book. Number one, to positively impact the practice of assisted reproductive technology. I'm once again, I'm all for science to enable wanting people to have a family, as long as it is with consideration for the people created by that science. Number two, to impact the legislative agenda for that donor conceived Bill of Rights. And lastly, to maybe represent the feelings and the well being of all people that learn later in life that they are misattributed. And there's a whole variety of reasons that one could be misattributed. By misattributed, I mean that your DNA and your birth certificate don't line up, right? Something's askew.
Yes.
Now, like me, you could be semi adopted or donor conceived or closed adopted. You could be the product of a one night stand or an extramarital affair or a sexual assault. You could be raised by another family member. Aunt Martha was really, was your
For
mom.
sure.
and cousin Mary was really your biological mother. That happens in families even today,
True.
or switched at birth. There's a whole host of reasons. Now, Pew Research looked at this with the database of 50 million people, 50 million people in the DNA database today, and they concluded that 1 out of 5 take that test and have a DNA surprise, and maybe 1 out of 20 learn that they're misattributed parentally. Mom or dad wasn't really biological, but 1 in 5 find they have maybe grandma wasn't grandma, or Uncle Harry had a child and they have a new cousin that they never knew they had. Family secrets just have no place to run and no place to hide anymore.
Certainly.
I started
Technology.
I started my book off with a quote from Buddha that said,
Yes. Can you share to us,
three,
Mister?
three, three things are certain to appear: the sun, the moon, and the truth.
The truth will set you free.
There you go.
Yes, so good luck to your goals, Mr. Peter, and thank you so much for your advice. So, what are the long term psychological effects on individuals who discover their donor conceived status without prior knowledge?
Well, for me, uh, I had that genealogical bewilderment raging, and I learned of my seed, and I learned how to navigate some trauma as a result of that. And I have now a 5-part program to navigate that trauma. The first one is just acknowledge that you experienced the trauma to begin with. Uh, Secondly, seek all the information that you can about your history, about that trauma, and get some help, whether it be a support group, or in my case, it was both a support group as well as some therapy. Uh, Reveal, secrets are just poison. Revealing for me was healing as well. So reveal in order to heal. And lastly, forgive. I couldn't really heal unless I forgave my mother, forgave myself, forgave anyone who was a part of the secret.
Certainly. Let it go, people. Forgive and live at the present. So, how do advancement in DNA testing technology affect the anonymity of sperm donors and the discovery of genetic origins?
Well, it's not only sperm donors today; it's egg donors, embryo, it's extramarital affairs, etc. And just understand that secrets are poison, and there's no place to run and no place to hide. DNA just does not lie.
True. Thank you for the technology. And Mr. Peter, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, Food 101, in its fifth season, people. Fifth season with my partner in crime, Chef Alessandro Panatoni, one of the Italian specialty chef in one of the five-star hotel in downtown Toronto. So please do listen to our latest episode. We are reading our letter senders all over the world. So, what lessons can be learned from your personal narratives about the complexities surrounding artificial insemination and family dynamics?
Well, there's an interesting essence I got about family from this, because upon learning, I went to my Italian cousins and I told them, hey, we're not really biological. And my cousin Eddie really put it very well. He said, well, maybe you're not biological anymore, but we'll call you a logical cousin. And you're a logical Italian now. So the sense of family has a lot to do with a commonality of upbringing, commonality of traditions, common foods, common stories. How about common enemies? As a child, we had common enemies when the adults when we misbehaved. Common memories. So my sense of family is far greater, and I think with my Italian cousins in particular, once I told them this whole thing, it created a sense of intimacy that we didn't have previously. So now our our bond is actually closer.
That thing that make you closer and closer. Now you have family ties. So, Mr. Peter J. Boni, thank you so much for sharing your book to the world, Uprooted. And we are looking forward for more empowering books to come. So, can you please invite our listeners to support Uprooted?
Most certainly. Once again, my website, www.peterjbonny.com. I've been taking 100% of the proceeds that I've earned and then some and donating them to advocacy organizations that are working towards this donor conceived Bill of Rights.
Mr. Peter Boni, we salute you. Thank you so much for your service and thank you so much for your time.
I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
More to come, people. See you soon.